For investors that have had a negative view on the UK market, they've been right. The earnings growth has been poor. The performance of the market's been terrible over the last decade. It's gone from being a small part of the global index to being an even smaller part. When you look at the makeup of the index, it's heavy in energy, banks, utilities, pharma companies. It's hard to find seemingly exciting new world companies within it. But the index itself is pretty unrepresentative of all the businesses, and we can find some great businesses within there. So our view is very much at the individual company level, and the UK has got some great global businesses, leaders in their markets, companies that have been around for a long time, where they're time tested, produce fantastic shareholder return as individual businesses, even in a market that hasn't. And that's very much our interest, finding those great global leading businesses that might escape most people's attention. And our portfolio has 5 UK businesses today.
Nice. So that's an important clarification. You're not coming on here today and saying you think the FTSE 100 is going to outpace the S&P 500 for the next 10 years. It's about the individual quality names that you're seeing in the UK.
That's very much in the same way that we find great US businesses but don't have a view on the US market. Likewise in the UK, it's been a happy hunting ground for us. We like unlike perhaps emerging markets, we like the auditing, the governance standards in the UK. We like the long history of businesses, listed businesses. We like the transparency. I'm not sure what it is in the water there, but we find there's an unusually high degree of businesses that in the UK market that talk to the public investors like owners. There's a real owner mentality. It comes through strongly in their annual reports, their presentation material, in ways we find less common in the US. So the
friendly market,
wanting us to understand their businesses, treat us like owners, make the business super transparent. Why does it work so well? Why do customers choose that particular business? Who do they compete with? What matters to them as managers? How do they measure themselves? How are they doing on those metrics? The sort of businesses that we own, we find those characteristics seem overrepresented in the UK in ways that for us as shareholders make it a friendly market, a happy hunting ground.
So if the UK is like quite transparent and open and perhaps honest with their assessment of themselves, and the US is, the rose-coloured glasses, always putting a positive spin on things, where does Australia sit between those two spectrums?
I'm sure there are some individual businesses in Australia that treat owners and treat shareholders really, really well. It's not part of our mandate, so I don't spend a ton of time looking at it. Sometimes I think the corporate governance history in Australia has not been best in class, but within that I'm sure there's some really great examples of good shareholder treatment.
So the FTSE's outperformed both S&P, NASDAQ and ASX year to date, I guess given what's going on at a macro level. Do you consider them macro when sort of looking for these companies, or is it very much just let's try and find the hidden gems?
Well, what appeals to us in the UK businesses that we found is that they are largely macro-agnostic businesses, and that's what we always want to own, businesses where whatever we're reading about in the papers matters as little as possible, whether it's trade wars, geopolitical events, interest rates, housing cycles, consumer confidence don't buffet the businesses around in a meaningful way, and that's what we've found in the UK, some great examples of businesses like that. We like businesses that are broad, have a multi-geography footprint, so whatever's going on in one country doesn't buffet the whole business around, and the businesses in the UK that we own are really nicely broadly spread. So that's a real attribute. It means their business cycles are pretty muted. The difference between a good year and a bad year is pretty small, and even in years like we're finding at the moment where the external environment is ever changing, these are businesses where that doesn't move the needle very much and they're able to grow in tough conditions.
Yeah, it is something that I think a lot of investors overlook about the UK is that so many of their companies make so much of their revenue offshore. And so we think about, the UK macro environment and, perhaps a slow growing economy, perhaps, unstable or like a ever rotating leaders and the Brexit effect and all of that stuff, but a lot of these companies are making a lot of revenue overseas and are a bit more immune from some of that.
I think there's a great history in the UK of being multi-geography, and I think one of the perhaps things that gets missed when people are thinking about equity markets is the correlation between what's happening in the economy and what drives corporate earnings and ultimately share price is a lot less than people think. So there's lots of reasons for people to be negative on the UK political environment, Brexit, the economic growth, but it matters a lot less to share price returns and equity outcomes over time than people think. The correlation between the macro and micro is a whole lot less than is popularly believed.